to me, whenever I'm thinking about the hero's journey or the hero in a story I'm going to tell, it's always my audience. I want to know, who is that audience? What's in it for them? What do they care about? And why is that important relative to what I'm going to share? But why don't they currently have whatever it is that they're looking for that I can help them get? Therefore, get them to picture what a brighter tomorrow would be by using what I have to help them get there. They're all true stories. They're all well told, but they are told from the perspective of your audience. So I always first think, what's in it for my audience?
Over 1 million Americans face sentencing every year, and it will be the most important day of their lives. But we don't fully understand the system, how broken it is, and what we can do to make it better. I'm Doug Passon. I'm a 25-year criminal defense lawyer and a sentencing expert. My goal is to bring more awareness, more fairness, and more humanity to the sentencing process. So, are you ready? Then let's get set for sentencing. Hey everybody, Doug Passon coming to you from Studio 3553 in Scottsdale, Arizona. Let me just put this right out here. Nothing in persuasive advocacy makes sense except in the light of selling. The question becomes, is the decision maker in our cases going to be willing to buy what we are having to sell, what we're trying to sell them? And this goes every stage of the proceeding. Don't charge my client because, or, please offer this beneficial plea bargain, or please, jury, find my client not guilty, or please, judge, give my client the lenient sentence that would result in justice in the case. Or it goes on and on, even post-conviction. Please, President Biden, pardon my client, give them clemency, commute their death sentence. Over and over and over again, we as lawyers are trying to persuade, and it's essentially sales. So who better to have us help us get set for sentencing and be better salespeople, better in branding, better in marketing, all in service to our clients' greater good than Park Howell. Hello, Park Howell. Welcome.
Hi, Doug, man. Great to be on your show.
Let me tell you about Park Howell. He's affectionately known as the world's most industrious storyteller. I call Park, I love Malcolm Gladwell, and I read his stuff, and Malcolm Gladwell talks about connectors. There are connectors in his life, people who put other people in touch and connect with others. And Park is that guy for me. I've listened to Park's podcast before I ever met Park, and he reached out to me and found me. So we've had a long history, but he's not only a marketing guru, he's a story expert, really. I mean, he knows that narrative is everything when it comes to the work that he does. And he's so neck deep in this thing that I've keep telling my audience about, the ABT, the and, but, therefore, narrative template. He's so deep into that with Dr. Randy Olson that's how I even learned of the ABT. And he co-authored the Narrative Gym for Business with him, like I did the Narrative Gym for Law. And he's got this great, I just talked about the podcast, but let me tell you what it is: The Business of Story, which is a fabulous podcast. I listen to it regularly. He's also the author of the wildly popular business marketing storytelling book. It's called Brand Bewitchery: How to Wield the Story Cycle System to Craft Spellbinding Stories for Your Brand. I could go on and on telling you about Park, but I just want to talk to Park. So hi, and let's dig in. I want to talk.
That was great. My head just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So
I could keep going. Man. And so, yeah, I've been on Park's podcast 2 times. So I'm going to put those links in the show notes at setforsentencing.com, because we go deep into story and what I do, but this isn't about me. This is about you. So I want to talk about origin stories. I love to start with origin stories. So you're a marketing guy, you're a business guy, but at some point you had a lightning bolt moment that narrative storytelling was going to get you home. Well, tell me about that.
Well, man, that moment came when our middle child, Parker, was going to film school at Chapman University in Orange, California. And this was roughly 2006, graduated 2010. He spent 12 years in Hollywood in the filmmaking world, focusing primarily on virtual reality and mixed reality filmmaking. He has since, with his fiance, moved to Austin, Texas, and he's plying his craft out there at that intersection of filmmaking and technology around Austin. I tell you all that because leading up to that point, back in the early 2000s, I was running my ad agency in Phoenix, Arizona called Park & Co. And what we traditionally knew about advertising and marketing and brand development changed dramatically with the onset of the internet. You know, we used to tell our brands or feel that our brands own the influence of mass media, but the masses, of course, have become the media, and they own all of our stories. And it is so hard to stand out because we are absolutely bombarded with this cacophony of communication that our brain just swats it away, unless we can find a way to hack through that noise and hook into the hearts of the audience, both online and in person, by the way. And so I went looking for the answer. I, like you, Doug, found the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. And I thought, this is amazing. Why don't they teach this in marketing and advertising? I mean, this is a template for helping to get customers on board, sharing your brand story and whatever. And then as I was teaching that, and I wrote my first book, Brand Bewitchery, 10-Step Story Cycle System. It's a little bit complicated when you get into a few more steps than a handful. And so I started looking for more answers. And that's when I met Dr. Randy Olson in his second book called Connection back in 2013, where he introduced the and, but, therefore framework. And when I saw Doug from a brand marketer's position, I thought, this seems too good to be true. It's like the Holy Grail. How do you make a complex message simple, quickly, so that your messages land right the first time, every time? Reached out to Randy, had him on my show way back when, and we started talking about the ABT. He teaches it in the science world, the academic world. I translate all of that knowledge over to the business world, teach it a little bit differently here. You, of course, have taken it and you teach it in the lawyering world. So when I finally got all that, I had a lot more customers coming to me about teaching them about story frameworks than they did hiring me to come and do their branding work anymore. They were so fascinated by this. And so in 2016, I exited my advertising career after 20 years of running my own ad agency, founded the business of story, and I haven't looked back since. Now I consult, teach, coach, and speak internationally on the power of story in leadership, sales, marketing, branding, communications. I'll take a deep breath now.
I love that. And there's so much to unpack there, but like you, that was the ABT was I thought, wow, this does seem too good to be true, but it was exactly what I was looking for, because I was teaching lawyers about hero's journey, and you simplified in Brand Bewitchery to 10 steps. But I think if the hero's journey in and of itself could have 14, depending on who tells which book, it's like 17 steps.
Yeah.
It's just too complicated. But at the end of the day, I'm kind of fascinated that you say you put your marketing business aside and focus on your story business, because the way I see it, it's all the same. Like, and I guess maybe the takeaway, you tell me, is you don't get to the marketing part until you've figured out the narrative part.
Well, yeah, you got to start with your brand story, get that narrative down, and it's got to be a singular narrative. It's what's that one problem that we are solving on behalf of our customers. Now, granted, everybody will argue, Doug, well, Park, I solve lots of problems. I get that. But your brain doesn't want to have to digest lots of problems. It's like, what's your one thing? So in my case, the one problem I really solve across the board, no matter who I'm training, is boredom. That's the number one villain in their life. If they are communicating in a boring way, they're going to lose their audience. If they are sending out boring messages to their colleagues, they're going to lose their company. So how do you do that? You use that energy and that force of narrative structure, not just and, but story structure that turns that boredom into excitement, into enchantment.
And I think in my work, what Randy
the question was, last time you bought anything, you're bored into buying anything, Doug? We're not. We're excited into buying something emotionally. That's what story does.
I love it. And if Randy were here, he'd say the greatest sin is boredom and confusion.
Yeah.
which is to say, especially in my world, like a lot of the stuff we talk about is kind of interesting on its face. But the big challenge I run into is that there's so much information there, and it all may be interesting, but it's confusing to the decision maker about how it all fits together. And it really all goes back to Shirley's law, which is if you haven't shaped it into a narrative, it's they're going to make their own story about all this. So they may be interested, but it's very unclear what your point is. And so for me, this laser focus of controlling the story is huge. But here's what my struggle has been through my work, which is because I still love the hero's journey, and fundamentally the hero's journey is baked into the cake of the ABT. It's just a simpler expression of it, but you have the broad strokes is there's a hero and they're on a quest, right? And they face obstacles and overcome those things and arrive back home hopefully better and more knowledgeable than when they before they went through the ran this gauntlet. And so a lot of that is baked in the ABT, but when we talk about the hero, I get confused because my clients sometimes are so otherized and so they've been through so many trials and tribulations in their lives, and they've obviously had struggles and challenges. They wouldn't be my clients if they didn't have these issues, be it abusive childhood or substance abuse or poverty or homelessness, all these things. And so I connect with my clients in the sense that I do view them as the heroes of their own story. And I find it's very empowering to them to help them view this. Like, I know you've made mistakes. I know life has been hard, but look at all the things you've gone through and overcome. And even though you're in all this trouble, there's still hope for a happy ending for you. And I feel like I want to empower the decision maker to view my client not as the other, not as the gum under their shoe that just did this bad thing and that defines them, but that I want them to see my client in a very real sense as a heroic, worthy, redeemable human. And so my I think my sort of default is I'm trying to make my client the hero. But I think you would probably tell me I'm not, that's probably not the right focus, right? Tell me in your mind who is the hero of the story almost always?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one that throws lots and lots of people. So to me, whenever I'm thinking about the hero's journey or the hero in a story I'm going to tell, it's always my audience. I want to know, who is that audience? What's in it for them? What do they care about? And why is that important relative to what I'm going to share? But why don't they currently have whatever it is that they're looking for that I can help them get? Therefore, get them to picture what a brighter tomorrow would be by using what I have to help them get there. I, as the brand, the attorney, someone offering a product or service, or someone to try to get someone to buy into a vision, a mission, a way of thinking. We don't introduce ourselves to the very end of that therefore statement. So we want to stay focused on our audience. Now you might be telling Doug a story, and let's just call someone Jim. And Jim is someone that you are helping to mitigate their sentence video. And he's the perfect hand, right? That, yeah, they got to pay the dues, but maybe they've thrown too much on Jim. I'm going to tell Jim's story, and Jim is going to be the main, the main protagonist in that story, but I'm always thinking about my audience. So say, for instance, say you end up with two different audiences. This is just the AB hypothetical. You got one judge, and the background on this judge is fairly somewhat lenient. They take into consideration the upbringing of Jim, right? So you're going to tell Jim's story from maybe a really crappy, lousy upbringing because that's what's going to resonate with that particular judge, all right? Maybe then you've got a jury audience there. And throughout the course of the trial, potentially, that you have read that this jury is into redemption. They're probably fairly open to redemption. So you might retell that story when talking to the journey or to the jury from Jim's perspective, a redemption tale within that. They're all true stories. They're all well told, but they are told from the perspective of your audience. So I always first think, what's in it for my audience? Can I get them living vicariously through the protagonist of my story? In this case, it would be Jim. But I got to know what pushes them or drives them. And then I would tell a story from that perspective. So that's why Jim is the protagonist, the hero in this story, but you're really telling it from your audience's point of view. It's almost like a different genre. If you're Spielberg, you're not going to show up with a horror movie for young families, or you're not going to show up with a really thought-provoking World War II documentary to an audience expecting a comedy.
Yeah.
So you got to know that audience in a godlike way.
Okay. So the audience is the hero. And now, how do you motivate the hero? In other words, how do you help them understand what's in it for? That's the big question. When you find who your hero, your decision maker is, and you ask what's in it for them, how do you get them to sort of answer that
Yeah.
question?
In my world, sales and marketing, I think it's probably easier than in your world because we have a lot of consumer research and we can go in, we can fine tooth target a singular audience, know what's in it for them relative to our offering and why that's important to them, but why don't they have it, and so forth. In your world, you would have to educate me on how do you do your due diligence on that
Mm-hmm.
jury, on
Right.
that prosecutor, on that judge, to really understand what their tendencies are,
Yeah.
what's going to connect with them.
Well, for a jury, and this is my, I don't do a lot of jury trial. I don't do any jury trials anymore. I did for many years, but I think you get a questionnaire at the beginning of when you're selecting a jury in voir dire, and so they answer basic questions about, and some judges let you go deeper into the questioning, about like, do you have any bumper stickers on your car, or how many kids do you have, or what, like, you're trying to get a sense of how they think, and it is a lot of voodoo science, I think, in a lot of ways. But you have a
Mm-hmm.
bare bones understanding of individually who these people are, and then you make assumptions about maybe how they think, or what makes them tick. But again, voodoo science, I think. And some people hire like really expensive jury consultants with psych degrees who can, pretend to get into the minds of these jurors and pick the perfect jury for your case, but I think at the end of the day, it's simpler than that, which is jurors come in with, I know they're told presumption of innocence, don't make any assumptions about this guy, but the truth is the general attitude, I think most defense lawyers would agree, is where there's smoke, there's fire. You've been charged, you've got this far in the process, you know, the government has said it, and Lord knows the government would never lie about anything, but they're basically ready for the tricky defense lawyer to try to pull the wool over their eyes, but I'm not gonna fall for any of their big city lawyer tricks. So
Right.
I think the hurt for them is, I want to do the right thing. I mean, that hopefully is a fundamentally basic human instinct, but they don't. They're programmed. Especially look at all the TV shows, Law and Order, and all. They're programmed their whole life that the right thing is to lock up the bad guy, and you're the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
Your client's the bad guy, and you're the bad guy because you're sitting beside them, with the audacity to
To
defend
defend
them.
them.
So
Yeah.
I'm bad by proximity, by default. But I think that's the goal, is to, I believe, and this may be getting to where I really can't wait to go, which is the pain, the big problem, and the fear, and amplifying that pain, which is, jurors, you got a human being's life in your hands, and the decision you make will, the stakes are so high that it'll impact the rest of your life. And if you make the right decision, justice will happen. If you make the wrong decision, you may send an innocent person to prison, and I want them to be very afraid and know the solemnity of the circumstance, and the stakes are so high. And I think the same can be said for the main decision makers in my case, which is the judge, because fundamentally, I do believe that judges want to do the right thing in the case. It's just that it's our job to make sure they understand what that is by telling our client's story in the right way and making them, I guess, I don't know if fear is the best, but I'd rather go for hope. It's all a battle between hope and fear, right? And
Yeah.
I want the judge to feel good about not just their decision, but I want them to feel good about my client as a person, that I'm going to make this right decision and it's not going to blow back on me. This guy's
Hmm.
not going to go out and, say it's a DUI case and I cut this guy a break. Well, every judge in the world is worried, afraid that they're going to be the one that cuts this guy a break, and he goes out tomorrow, drinks again, and kills somebody. And the judges and everyone's going to be saying, "This is your fault, judge, because you had the chance to slay this monster, and lock him
Right.
up, and you let him go. This is blood on your hands." And I think every judge probably has that fear going in their head too. So I don't know. I I'm not doing a very good job at making the complex simple. I'm just throwing everything against the wall and seeing if anything sticks with you.
Can I give you an example
Yeah,
of this idea about making your audience the hero in your story
please.
using the ABT? So I'm going to do a screen share here,
Okay.
and it's just the best way to show it in action. Now, this happens to be a landing page from Sharp Electronics. About a year and a half ago, we were still in the COVID rule. So we were doing virtual training, and I had about 135 of their sales and marketing folks
Mm-hmm.
in this particular session. And so I was teaching them the ABT, that your stories are not about what you make, but what you make happen, that audiences prefer outcomes over outcomes over offerings in your storytelling. And it's always
Mm-hmm.
about them. So all I ever have to do, Doug, is pull up one of their landing pages and read it to them. And we do a before and after thing. So here's one of their landing pages selling one of their big, gigantic, expensive systems and the peripherals and whatever. Read this with me. For years,
Okay.
Sharp Document Products and Solutions have been earning high praise and prestigious awards from leading MFP testing organizations. For Sharp, this represents more than just an accumulation of accolades. It means that trusted industry experts, as well as customers, recognize that the remarkable innovation, user-friendly design, blah, 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 blah. I'm not even going to finish it because I don't want any of your audience to tune out at this point.
Uh-huh.
But
That's
look
a
at this.
lot.
It's all about them. All they're
Yeah.
doing is chest pounding. It's
Yeah.
completely non-narrative, meaning you could place an and before each one of those sentences.
Yeah.
So it's just this litany of aren't we wonderful, and here's why we're this wonderful and everything we're all about. So watch what happens when you take this very standard non-narrative BS and turn it into a narrative using the and but therefore framework. So you're going to feel the difference of it. And
Mhm.
it is going to speak to what we're going to talk about in a minute about find the hurt, amplify the pain, heal the wound. But it's also being spoken or written from the audience's point of view, the reader's point of view. So check this out. Feel the difference. Shorter runs, quicker turnaround times, complete control over your in-house printing. It's what you want, but your productivity is currently stuck on pause. Therefore, Sharp digital MFPs and copier printers will have you printing like a pro with our industry-leading innovation, user-friendly design, outstanding reliability, unsurpassed security, and boundless expandability. So they still get to get in all of their descriptors about how wonderful they are. We, of course, have cut them by 3/4, but it is now being written from the audience's point of view. Here's what you want, but
Right.
you don't have it because your productivity is stuck on pause. Just kind of a fun way to get their brain thinking, why are you paused? It doesn't work. It jams all the time. We run out of ink, whatever. Therefore, Sharp can solve that problem for you. Here's the very interesting anecdotal ROI on this particular ABT. The very next day, I presented this on a Thursday. Friday morning, one of the national sales account managers from Sharp went into a customer that they had been trying to close for 6 months, and they were getting nowhere. And he wrote an email and said, I literally just lifted Parks ABT put it at the beginning of my sales presentation. I could feel the difference in the room immediately. And within an hour, I had a signed PEO for the system. Now, I've been trying to do this for 6 months. The only thing I did differently was invoke the and, but, therefore narrative framework to get my singular narrative super focused on what was in it for my customer, placing them at the center of the story. And to me, in the business world, that's a great example of it in action.
I love it. I love it because I think that we do this as lawyers all the time. Our default is on behalf of our client to basically say, me, me, me. Look at me. I've done this. I did this. I deserve this. I want a second chance. I want. And you're saying, no, 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 no. This is about judge. What do you want? I know what the prosecutor wants. Prosecutor wants to send this dude to prison for as long as possible. I know what I want. I want a lenient sentence, but judge, what do you want? And how do we get there? I like that approach. I think that makes very good sense. Or jury, what do you want?
Right.
Or governor who's granting clemency, what do you want?
How can they feel better about themselves when they walk out of the room? A lot of times then you are in that convincing role, aren't you? Because they've already told them an anti-story about your client. I feel better when I walk out of this room if they get the maximum sentence thrown at them. You have to change that mindset. And the only way you're going to change that story they're already telling themselves is to, number one, appreciate that they're telling themselves that story, and then tell them a new story that they can buy into and be a part of that more lenient sentence. And they can feel even better about themselves when they leave the room because justice at their hand has truly been served.
But by the way, going back to the sharp analogy, it's not just a perfectly crafted ABT, but it's just masterful choice of language. And so, but your productivity is stuck on pause, right? So it's just so perfect because you're talking about a copy machine. We know about pause, but it just tells a story, layers and layers of story. It's got alliteration. It's a visual. It's word pictures. So this story is playing in your mind. So that's in and of itself is a skill that when you're very good at it, it's just almost not even obvious that it's so cool that it's happening. So I felt the need to sort of shine a light on that because that's not easy to do. Okay, so where does this amplify the pain? Wait, now let me make sure I get it right.
Let me share that finding with you.
Yes, find the hurt, amplify the pain, and heal the wound. Come tell me.
Yeah, back in the late 2008-9, his name is Trevor Hill. He was a Canadian Navy leader that worked on aircraft carriers and their water filtration systems and whatever. He had gotten out of the Navy, moved to Arizona, and he started a company called Global Water. And he was trying to change water use regulations because technology had increased to the point of they could literally take the sewage from your home, run it through the tech, and send it back to you. And it says just as clean and pristine as if they did all that, pumped it down on the ground, pulled it up out of the ground, did it again, and sent it back over to you, which he was trying to overcome so that they would have a less expensive operation and more water conservation.
Are you telling me that I'm drinking my own toilet water here in Arizona?
No, I don't think all those regs had gotten passed, but that was his big mission in the name of water conservation and just being able to provide a lot less expensive water. And I was sitting in his office one day, Doug, and this was before I was really studying story, but he says, Park, all sales is. And I go, what's that, Trevor? He says, find the hurt, amplify the pain, heal the wound. And it just hit me again from a branding guy. I go, God, that's beautiful, whatever. And then when I learned about the ABT many years later, I look back on it, I go, well, that's basically what Trevor was talking about, setup, problem, resolution. In that setup, we are determining what does your audience want? And, then you're thinking kind of ahead. This is what they ultimately want. And within that is the hurt because they don't currently have it, right? So then you go to the but you don't have it because of this. And now you want to amplify that pain so they really, really feel it. And then you're therefore is you are there to heal the wound. Find the hurt, amplify the pain, heal the wound. Now, with the ABT, we're always preaching, you want to start that first statement of a statement of agreement. Here's what this shared vision is we all have. Well, implied in that shared vision is the problem because you don't currently have it yet, right? The pain point that you don't have that you're going to now call out and amplify in your but statement. Find the hurt, amplify that pain so they really feel it, and therefore you're the way forward.
I think what's has this on my mind lately is because the amplify the pain is resonating with me deeply. And what I'm doing is just ABT remedial 101, people need to know this is where we start. We start with the pain, the hurt, right? That's your butt, that's your problem. All of narrative, Randy says, is problem solving. And narrative is defined as a series of events that occur in search of a solution to a problem. That's what Randy says. So I always say when we're working on narrative, we got to go right to the problem. And usually, and it makes sense because when I tell them, well, whose problem are you talking about? I'm generally talking about the decision maker's problem. It's, in other words, we usually go to what's the worst facts of this case or the worst aspect of this that we know the judge is going to have the hardest time getting over and around to get to the result that we want to heal that wound, right? So we're identifying the problem, but you're saying it's not enough to just identify the problem, but you've got to punch it up. You have to amplify that pain. So how does that work?
Well, it's your word usage, certainly. Surprise when you can get in there. I love the word because in the but statement, because that has that conjunction that attaches the pain to, the hurt, that attaches that hurt to amplifying that pain. So what a lot of people will argue on is, again, logic and reason, and logically, why is this a problem, whatever. I love to rather amplify that pain through emotion. What does it feel like? How frustrating is it? How, that you've got this? How annoying is it? I mean, what is it that they're feeling that, God, I just want to overcome this feeling. And therefore, if you move forward doing this physical action of making this physical decision or buying into this physical thing, it's going to fulfill that wish, get rid of that pain that you've amplified. Look at Nike does a good job of it, and just simply their tagline, just do it. What are they saying? You want to be healthy, right? But what's the pain? But you're lazy. You want to amplify that, but you're lazy. So you're sitting around on the couch and you're gaining a lot of weight and you're not living up to your full potential. Therefore, just do it. You don't have to be an Olympic athlete. You don't have to be a professional sports person. Anybody. This is for the common good of the world. So, find the hurt. You're not in as good a shape as you could be. Amplify the pain because you're sitting your fat ass around eating potato chips, watching TV. Therefore, heal the wound. Just go and do it.
So that because thing is very powerful too, because you're saying, okay, the hurt is you're not in good shape. And because is you're doing this to yourself. You're not taking care of yourself. You're eating junk food. So yeah. And I just did this little exercise with Randy. I was working on a clemency petition, and the hurt was, the big problem was this client's facing the death sentence because she had terrible lawyering and the government cheated. So it's bad enough that they're facing this sentence, but the amplification of the pain is they should never have gotten that sentence in the first place.
Yeah.
And that is scary when we think about somebody who doesn't deserve a sentence in our system getting, especially the death penalty. And then you heal the wound by giving them what? That's the action item, right?
Here's the way forward. Yeah. So I give you another example of this. I do a lot of work with the Home Depot and their internal sales teams that work with large corporate clients and contractors and that sort of thing. And when I was doing that, one of the guys at Home Depot kind of jestingly asked, what's the shortest ABT Park? And this is my favorite go-to. It's you communicate and care, but bore. Therefore, tell a story. Now that's almost vacuous, but it has the 3 acts of story there. You communicate and let's raise the stakes and actually care. But here's the problem. Here's the pain point, but you bore. Therefore, tell a story. Now, let's expand that just a little bit to find the hurt, which we already have, that you're boring.
Yeah.
Let's amplify why it is that you're boring, and then let's heal the wound by showing you the way forward. So, as a business leader, you communicate with your colleagues and truly care about the outcomes to excite them to action. But you're not connecting because you're boring as you lead with logic and reason when what they really want is the emotional pull of a story that they can get behind. Therefore, imagine how you could excite them to action by using the simple framework of the and but therefore to help you hack through the noise and hook into their hearts so your message is landing right the first time, every time.
I love it. I
So you
love
can
it.
take that short little ABT that uses the structure and now amplify that pain, but you're
Mhm.
boring because you're
Mhm.
leading with logic and reason when what they really want is the emotional pull of a story.
And I was thinking about this because I've had story training before, all through my life. And I have a great mentor who always talked about story in the context of screenwriting, TV and film. And he says, you always want to ask the question, the problem is central, but then you say, only the bigger problem is dot, dot, dot. And that is what we call high drama. He said all of high drama is simply high conflict. And the more
Mm-hmm.
conflict you build into the story, the more compelling, engaging that story is going to be. And I think that is the same expression of amplify the pain. It's the bigger
Yeah.
problem. Only the bigger problem is, and when we always talk about Wizard of Oz, so the epiphany came to me that that's an easy example, which is the bud is she gets swept off to Oz by this tornado. And that's bad. I mean, she's lost in a strange land. She's got to get home. Only the bigger problem is what? She dropped the house on a witch when she arrives, and now she's marked for death because her sister's out for vengeance, and she's a wickeder witch than the lady the house got dropped on. And I think about what would the Wizard of Oz be without that bigger problem? She's just hopping down the yellow brick road with her friends and finally gets her way home. Like there's no story without the bigger problem.
Yeah. Well, and that goes back to what I find so interesting about the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, this monomyth that he identified in the mid 1900s, way back
Mhm.
when in that century, 90s, and introduced it to Hollywood. Well, actually, Hollywood kind of understood or revealed it through his work. And George Lucas wrote his senior thesis using the hero's journey at USC, created the initial Star Wars movie from it. And of course, the rest of that's history. But you go back to the Wizard of Oz, as you were talking about, people didn't even know the hero's journey existed because Campbell hadn't revealed it yet. He hadn't been
Mhm.
around long enough to reveal it yet. And yet, when you look at the Wizard of Oz, it is the perfect monomyth hero's journey that those
Mhm.
writers just naturally followed in the writing of the book and then the screenplay. And oh, by the way, and sometimes I really piss off Star Wars fans with this. If you overlay Star Wars with the Wizard of Oz, it's the same damn story, is it not?
Mhm.
Dorothy grew up in Kansas and she was a farm girl and she was bored. She wanted some adventure in her life. Gee, Luke grew up on Tatooine, and what the oxygen plantation, whatever they called it. He
We
was
need Matthew
bored. He
David
wanted
here to give us
adventure.
those geek out on the Star Wars. Go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and so she gets whisked off to the extraordinary world of Oz to find her way back home. He, by tornado, his tornado was the death of his aunt and uncle at
Mm-hmm.
the hands of the Imperial fleet,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Mm-hmm.
what? He whisks off on a speeder over to that little crazy town, Mos Eisley, in that little crazy bar with all those crazy creatures in there, just like
Yeah.
Munchkin Land. And then they get three folks that come along that help them on their process. They both have to take out the wicked witch or the evil wizard in their own way,
Yeah.
and then they return home with the
Yeah.
boon. So it's the same
Yeah.
doggone story.
Yeah. And we could do that with pretty much every good movie ever made. And I now I'm thinking about this tornado. You said that Luke's tornado was, and I think that's a really good story practice pointer, which is find your tornado,
Yeah,
because this is the thing. I guess Campbell would call that your inciting incident.
yeah,
Uh, and this is the thing that really throws your whole story into motion, right? There isn't much of a story until that tornado comes.
Exactly.
And for my clients, there's a lot of tornadoes, but there's usually one pivotal moment in their life that changes everything, and usually for the worse. And
Well, and
so,
the but statement of conflict is the tornado of the ABT. You got
mm-hmm,
this and it's beautiful, but because of this, but this thing is really
mm-hmm.
screwing you. Therefore, is
Yeah,
the
it's
way
coming
forward.
along and just rocking your world, blowing you to pieces, and you got to
Yeah.
figure you got to get back home.
Michelle and I, my wife Michelle and I, came across this series called Suits, which apparently came out in 2011. We had never even heard about before. And it
Mm-hmm.
popped up in our Netflix feed, number one show being watched, and we thought it was something brand new. We just roll the dice. We know zero about it. Let's just watch the first episode. Well, then we get into it, and it's of course 9 seasons,
Yeah.
135 episodes long, and we are now at the end of season number 8. In the last probably 6 weeks, we have been consuming this show. Number one, it's fabulous viewing. Number two, you see the ABT throughout it. In every scene, virtually every scene, there is a dynamic shift that Robert McKee, the legendary screenwriting coach I've been through, and I think you've been through his story
Yep.
training program, says, man, if you've got a scene and one character shows up and they have control of the room at the moment, by the time that scene is over, you will have had to flip the tables. Now they are leaving with their tails behind their leg, and whoever they came in to take on now has control. So you toggle back and forth between this positive
Yeah.
and this negative dynamic, which in and of itself is an ABT every time you watch it. And I think that series does a particularly good job of finding the hurt, amplifying the pain, and healing the wound in almost every single scene. They're not
Yeah.
always healing the wound because it's going to go on to the next thing. But if you want a study of storytelling and how to
Yeah.
amplify the pain, I'd direct you to Suits.
Oh, I'm so blown away that you mentioned. So we're going to talk about Suits some more right now. But the other thing, I think lawyer shows just intuitively are so good at it because they're just problems and solving problems, and it's just like tailor made if you do it right. But this is how I think about amplifying the pain in Suits. And in order to do that, I have to put on my, I know you're a fan of narcissists, and I know you've heard my story of The Simpsons and how in my narcissistic fantasy I helped inspire an episode of my
I
favorite,
love that.
of the greatest show of all time. We don't have to go back into that. We already talked about it. But I have a lot of narcissistic fantasies. And in my another narcissistic fantasy, I created Suits and it was stolen from me. And here's how this goes. I write screenplays mostly for fun, but this is way back before Suits. And it was called Scales. And it was
Scales.
Scales. And it was a double entendre like Suits is, right? Because they're all in their fancy suits, but it's all about lawsuits and blah blah blah. And Scales was about the scales of justice, but a lot of my characters were just really slimy reptilian snake-like thing. And there's actually a snake. Whatever. The point is, I'm not a very good screenwriter, but I wrote this script and it went into some competition. It made its rounds in Hollywood. It never went anywhere, but I know that it was seen by some pretty significant players in Hollywood. And the fundamental problem is the first level problem before the pain is amplified is exactly the same story, which is brand new kid, wunderkind legal genius is taken under the wing of this slick, morally dubious, high-powered lawyer in a huge firm that's going to put this guy through the ringer, right? And that's my story, and that's Scales. And in my narcissistic fantasy, the Hollywood Suits, the executives are reading the script and saying, pretty good script, only the bigger problem is what? Because we have lots of little problems along the way. But Suits is that story, only the bigger problem is what?
He's not an attorney.
Yeah, he's
a
not
fraud.
He's a fraud.
Which is
And
awesome.
it is. And that is a perfect example of amplifying the pain.
Yeah.
And that is sort of the gas that's going to power 8 seasons 9 seasons of that show, because it's always about, at some point this house of cards is going to come down, he's going to get found out, the shit's going to hit the fan, the blow, the shrapnel's going to hit far and wide in this firm, and boy oh boy, and it's
Yeah.
always there, kind of just working through the surface. And that is, I think, why Suits is such a popular show. And I watched it when it was on USA, and I really did love it for a while. I think I lost gas about season 6 or 7, but it's a great show.
Yeah.
And I think that concept of amplifying the pain is what makes it a great show.
Now let's juxtapose that to a very popular movie out by an amazing director, writer, director, Christopher Nolan, called was Oppenheimer.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
I
Don't give
fell
me any
asleep twice
spoiler
through it.
alerts. Don't spoiler alerts. Did they make the bomb or not? Okay. You fell asleep?
I fell asleep twice through it. There was never this great amplifying of the pain. It just kind of was, and then this, and then this, and then this. They had some, challenges to overcome through the process, but everyone kind of knew that going in. And I don't know, I'm a big Christopher Nolan fan, but I can tell you the last 2 movies I've seen of his bored me. And I'm like, why is it boring me? And I think it came down to the story structure. We know what the problem was. We knew what the pain is, but it never got amplified to the point that it made me care. And I hate to say it, but I actually fell asleep twice in the movie theater watching it.
Well, that is my ultimate test of a movie. If I fall asleep, I do. I fall asleep all the time. But if it's good, I'm never going to sleep.
Yeah.
And you talk about story structure. It's kind of ironic that Christopher Nolan made his bones with Memento, which was revolutionary in the sense that he told the entire story backwards.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that movie.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So, long time ago.
But it's probably, look at this thing. If I tell this forward, Park's probably going to fall asleep because it was a pretty ho-hum story, but telling it backward made it interesting. I'll tell you, the last movie I saw, I didn't fall asleep. I walked out of the theater, and it was the last Indiana Jones movie.
Oh, I heard.
And it was just the pain was amplified, but it was my pain watching because it's just like a bunch of action scenes tacked together with and I'm halfway through.
No narrative structure.
No narrative structure, just relentless fighting action. And I'm like, I guess this is what people need now. They need to be constantly like adrenalized, and that's sort of passing for story these days, and it's not. So.
It gives you some tingles and it might keep you awake, but there's virtually no meaning associated with it. I asked my friend Pete, who he and his wife and some other friends went to Indiana Jones, and asked him the next day, what'd you think of it? He goes, well, it was a little bit like going and seeing an old washed up uncle who you love dearly. So to your point, he goes, there was no real story to it. We went along for the roller coaster ride, and it was fun seeing all that stuff, but it wasn't a great movie.
And I'll tell you what, in terms of a missed opportunity, because I got real excited at the beginning because I thought the pain that they were causing was super unique and creative, and I was so excited for that to kind of build out and develop this thing, which is, it's set in the 60s. And it's coming into the late 60s and he's a man out of time. Like, he's living in this apartment, there's hippies around, and he's old school. And I'm like, this has the makings of a great sort of story about how old Indiana Jones is navigating this new world, this new America that he's just a foreigner in. But they didn't deliver on any of that. It was like a throwaway, and then he goes off on his adventure, and it's fights and crashes and this and that. And I can't even remember now what they were even looking for. Like, was something that was gonna blow up the world? I don't even know. I just don't know. And I feel sad in my bones because here's the ordinary, here's the stakes we could set. If they could have delivered on that promise, they could have wrapped up this and made it one of the all-time great movie franchises in history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And instead, they crashed the plane, and now their legacy is tarnished.
Well, look at Top Gun. So Top Gun was great when it came out way back in the day. And then they do Top Gun Maverick, and it was up for Academy Awards, for God's sake, which tells me that there's not a lot of great movie making or storytelling going on out there. However, I thoroughly enjoyed Top Gun Maverick, and it was the
Yeah.
exact same story. It completely paralleled the
Yeah.
first Top Gun. It's just with new-ish, older forms of the characters in there, and essentially they actually borrowed from Star Wars that they got to drop the little bomb down the little
Right.
vent hole and hole up and whatever. And
Which they
so it was
probably could
real
have done with a
obvious that it was
drone.
really entertaining, and there was actually a story arc there.
Well, and you know what, I saw it, and my brother-in-law loved it. He said, you got to see this movie, and I did, and I didn't fall asleep, so I guess
Yeah,
that's something.
it was a nostalgia for me. It was
Here
like, I
was the
remember when our kids were little and we watched this. We're all grown up now. And it's kind of like, yeah, this is just sort of a ride nostalgia. But
my
Academy
big
Award winner? No, I don't think so.
no. And here was my pain point there. Did Goose's kid really have to have the same cheesy mustache? I mean, it's Miles Teller, man. You don't need to slap a cheesy mustache on that man to get a great acting performance.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
speaking of which, have you seen the TV show starring this guy, Miles Teller, who The Offer?
Oh, yeah. About The Godfather.
Yeah.
Fabulous series.
So good.
Amazing,
So,
amazing
so
storytelling,
yeah.
TV making, characters. I loved it.
Uh-huh. And I actually use a clip. I use two clips from that series when I teach about the ABT and especially the Dobzhansky, which is boiling this down to the one thing, because there's two pitches in this movie where Coppola is pitching The Godfather to the studio exec, to Robert Evans, the
Yeah.
producer, the great big producer, and he gives the pitch of a lifetime, which causes this film to get green light. And he's saying, it's not about the mafia and revenge and violence and this, it's about family, and this is, you look at this and you say, this could be my family, so it's one, he boils it down to the one thing this story is about: family, and why it's going to resonate with everybody. And so I play that clip, and then the other clip is then Robert Evans is pitching Chinatown to the studio head. Do you remember that scene? And
Vaguely.
he's like, there's water. He goes, it's about water. And then there's Nicholson is a detective, and he's trying to figure out what's going on. And and then the studio execs, he's like, why do they call it Chinatown? He's like, I don't know.
So you got the before and after, huh? The
Yeah, yeah.
non-narrative and the singular narrative.
Yes, 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 yes. And the other clip is, do you watch The Crown on Netflix?
We have watched a lot of it. My wife is in the royalty. I'm not. I don't appreciate any families that are just handed wealth. So
Right.
no.
Well, you might
My wife
appreciate The
does.
Crown because this isn't a show about glorifying that. It's a show about sort of critiquing it.
Undermining it. Yeah.
But it's the cool moment in there is when you get towards the later years with Princess Diana, and she's involved with this guy Dodi Fayed. And Dodi Fayed's father is a very rich, they're Iranian or something, I don't know what, but Dodi wants to produce movies, and he wants his father to finance this little movie that he's making called Chariots of Fire. And
Yeah.
there's a whole scene where they're filming this movie, and his father's like, I don't get this, like, what is this about? And he said, this is, it's about a Jewish people during the war and how they go to the Olympics, and but he just looked at his dad. He goes, this is about an outsider becoming an insider. And for this man who grew up Iranian, and he's a very wealthy person, but he's never really accepted, especially in the royal circles. He's trying to get an audience with the queen, and he's just not. And it was just such a brilliant way to boil down a story into what is the one thing that's really happening in this story. I think if we can do that, especially in my cases,
Yeah.
which is the great challenge when I work with lawyers, to boil what is this one thing really about. But I guess that's our Dobzhansky, and that's why I love the ABT. That's why I love Randy, and that's why I love you, Park Howell. So thank you so much. Before we go, I want to make sure people know that you're out there and what what great things you have to offer. So first and foremost, Business of Story podcast. And you may be a lawyer or client, and you're like, well, I'm not into business. No. There's so much story. There's so much good, amazing story, and guests like luminaries, Robert McKee, me. No, but just go through, because you're on what are you, episode 405?
I'm reading through my book right now, and I've just recorded episode 426. So I've been at it for over 8 years. And it's been named the #1 business storytelling podcast in the world by Feedspot the last 2 years. So I'm very honored by that, and have great guests. Your show, for your viewers here, episode 341 with Doug on there. It is the launching of the book, The Narrative Gym for Law. And we just had a marvelous conversation about your use of storytelling and the ABT in that. And so I would really direct your viewers to that show. I had you on a few years earlier.
Yeah.
That was also a really terrific show. But since we talked so much about the ABT here, I would direct them to episode 341.
Awesome. And there's something for everybody on that. Even if you're not in the business world, I guarantee you, just peruse the titles and you'll find many, many that you're going to download, and listen to. And so we got the book, Brand Bewitchery. Park also has on his website, which is businessofstory.com, right?
Yeah.
Some small ABT modules teaching downloadable, on-demand educational components that really give you put a lot of meat on the bones about the ABT and some other stuff. So I would say definitely go to businessofstory.com.
And you can find that, Doug, at businessofstory.com/ABT. Go there, and it's going to take you right to the landing page of the ABT. It's an hour's program, online program, 3 20-minute modules. It's a little bit under an hour, but it'll teach them how to use the ABT 101, your basic build of and but therefore, ABT 201, the use of clauses like if then, the word because, the what now concept, and then ABT 301, where we really dial down to what you were just talking about, and that's that singular narrative. How do you find that singular problem solution dynamic narrative? And these are very short videos with lots of exercises, lots of examples in there to help you build ABTs.
Yeah, I haven't seen all of it, but I've seen some of it, and it's great, and I highly recommend it. Is there anything else I need to highly recommend, or did we cover it?
Well, how about this? You know how a narcissist warms up for a presentation, don't you?
No, I should know that.
Me.
Yay, I love it. I'm gonna steal
Sorry
that.
about that.
Park Howell, thank you so much for doing this. I so appreciate you, and safe travels, and we'll talk soon.
Doug, thank you.
That's it for today, but before we go, I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you to you, the listener, for spending time with us today getting set for sentencing. Whether you're a lawyer, someone who could use the help, or maybe you're just a true crime buff who loves the inside scoop on how this whole thing works, I am so glad you're here, and I hope you keep listening. If you're interested in knowing more about what I do, mitigation videos, case consults, live teaching, on-demand educational content, books, articles, all of it, please visit www.dougpassonlaw.com. I'm Doug Passon. Until next time, hang in there. Wait a minute, that's a stupid way to sign off a podcast about sentencing. Hang in there. What's the matter with you, man? I guess they call that gallows humor. Sorry. All right. Well, I will see you next time on Set for Sentencing. Bye-bye.